So we mentioned the word variables in our last lesson, and we had two variables that we were looking at. And now we're going to look at like how those variables affect each other. Okay, so we're going to look at independent and dependent variables. And when we conduct our experiments, we want to find how two variables interact and whether or not there's a relationship between them. So an example that's given to us in our book is we want to examine how much the amount of water that's supplied to different groups of plants affects the growth, the height of the plants as they grow. Okay, so then in this case, the two variables would be the amount of water supplied would be the first one, and the height of the plants would be the second variable. Okay, and in this case, the height of the plants is the one that's going to be affected by the amount of water. So the height of the plants is what we call the dependent variable, because the height of the plants depends on how much water is supplied. The amount of water supplied is called the independent variable, because it doesn't matter what the height of the plants is. If we choose to just give them a half cup of water, that's what we're giving. It's independent. So again, dependent variable depends, that's the key, depends on the independent variable. Okay? So in order to understand that relationship between the amount of water and the height of plant, we would have to control other variables, because there's not just, obviously there's more that goes into the growth of a plant. We have like things like insecticides, exposure to sunlight affects the way a plant grows, amount of weeding, the type of soil. There's lots of factors, and we call these controlled variables because the idea is that we could control how much insecticide we apply in this experiment. And then what changes is the amount of water. So for every group of plant, we could apply the same, we could control how much insecticide, control how much sunlight they get, control all this, and then the thing that changes is the amount of water. And at the center of it all is the height of the plants, and that's the variable that's dependent, okay? So again, the dependent variable will go in the middle because that's what's being affected, and the independent variable, you can put it up here, and then your other controlled variables would go around in the other ones. So when you're doing one of these, you could use, for example, let's say like the speed of a baseball thrown. So the speed of the baseball is going to be our dependent variable. Okay? And that's going to depend on a number of different factors. But say we wanted to measure the speed of a baseball thrown, and according to the height of the pitcher. So, height of the pitcher. Well, the height of the pitcher doesn't depend on how fast a ball goes, right? So this one would be our independent variable. Okay? So we have the speed of the ball, and that depends on the height of the pitcher. The taller pitcher, usually they have more leverage, so quite often they can throw a bit faster. But there's other factors, and these would be our controlled variables that we would put in these. So some different factors that could be controlled would be like the height of the mound. Another factor could be, another controlled variable could be the weight of the ball. A lighter ball might not go as fast. And that's a controlled variable, so we could make sure that all the balls being used in the experiment were the same weight. And another controlled variable could be the climate. For example, if we pitched indoors to avoid wind, okay, so that there's no wind, so that we're making sure that one pitcher isn't throwing into the wind. So, for example, in the Sky Dome, if they were playing in the Sky Dome. So again, we have the speed of the ball, and we're trying to figure out its relationship to the height of a pitcher. If we hold the height of the mound the same, keep the weight of the ball the same, and make sure that everyone's pitching indoors, then we could do enough experiments that where we could determine whether or not there's a relationship between the speed of a ball being thrown and the height of the pitcher. Okay, so again, main idea is that the variable that will depend on the other is the dependent one. It goes in the middle, and then things that could affect it would be controlled variables, and then the other variable, remember there's only two, for our purposes we're only looking at two variables, so the variable that's going to do the affecting, in other words, in this example, the height of the pitcher will affect how fast the ball is thrown. That's the independent variable. Okay. So again, dependent depends on the independent, and the independent influences the dependent.